Hello, everyone, and welcome to Chapter 1, Lesson 1 of the US and Wider World unit. In this lesson, we're going to have a look at the structure of the US government, and indeed in this chapter, the focus is to look at US politics as a whole under around 11 lessons. So you'll get to enjoy all of these lessons with Leaving Cert Plus. So I suppose, why does this matter? Why does the structure of the US government matter when it comes to Leaving Cert history? Well, I suppose history questions in US wider world will often talk about US presidents and the power they held, their domestic factors, their kind of foreign policy decisions. But knowing how presidents get elected and how the government works that they run is actually quite important. It can set very important context, okay? Some presidents have made great strides in domestic policy, for example, such as Lyndon B. Johnson and Harry Truman. And knowing key terms or ideas that relate to the political system will add context to any answers. And guys, context is key in Leaving Cert history. So it should be noted, if you're answering on a president and you don't know how the political system works, it can just look a little bit amateurish, okay? So let's use these couple of lessons to really get familiar with the US political system and how it's structured, okay? So the government, I suppose, is built on a number of principles, mainly federalism, separation of powers, and checks and balances. The structure ensures that power is distributed and balanced to prevent any single entity from gaining too much control. Specifically, checks and balances. We'll look at them in a second. Now, there are certain powers. These powers need to be separated using checks and balances. Let's see what that means in just a moment. The Constitution of the US was drawn up in 1787 and divides areas of responsibility between the federal government and state governments. Okay, so there are different powers. Let's have a look at those powers now. So, I suppose the system of checks and balances ensures that no single branch, and we'll look at these branches, becomes too powerful. So what are these branches? We have the legislative branch, that's, kind of main power number one. And we have the executive branch, that's main power number two. So the legislative branch can override a presidential veto, can approve presidential appointments, and can even impeach the president themselves and judges if needs be. The executive branch, which is led by the president, can veto legislation, appoint federal judges, and even pardon individuals. It should be noted, and we'll come to this in a second, that the legislative branch is kind of led by the House of Representatives and the Senate. So we'll look at that in a moment. Thirdly, our final branch, with the kind of three main branches in the US government, is the judicial branch. Now, when you think of judicial, you'll probably think of judges, and you'd be exactly right, okay? These guys can declare laws or executive actions as being unconstitutional, which other branches cannot do, okay? So different branches, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial branch, all have different powers and can kind of override each other to make sure that no one particular power has too much, power, I suppose. So, the legislative branch, let's have a quick look at it. It is a two-chamber legislature of the federal government, and it consists of the House of Representatives and the Senate, okay? The House of Representatives has 435 members, with representation based on state population. So, bigger states have more representatives. If you're elected, you're there for 2 years, and they have the power to initiate revenue bills, impeach federal officials, and they can even elect the president in the case of a tie with the Electoral College. So, if two presidents happen to get, the same amount of points in the elections, never happened, but if it does happen, the House of Representatives has the casting vote on who gets elected. The Senate is also part of the legislative branch. They're made up of 100 members. With two senators elected from each state. If you're elected, you're there for 6 years, unless you're impeached or something happens, and they can confirm presidential appointments, ratify treaties, and conduct impeachment trials. Impeaching is essentially where you're kind of seen as not fit to do your job anymore, or there's some kind of controversy around you doing your job, so you're essentially kind of kicked out of your position. But they usually require a trial to see if that is necessary. Okay? They can confirm presidential appointments. We've seen this already. So, 2 key questions. Pause the video here, see if you can answer these questions, and we'll come back to them in a second. So, 3 branches of US government, hopefully you know these by now: the judicial, the legislative, and the executive branches. And secondly, how long are the terms for the House of Representatives and the Senate? Well, Senate is 6 years and the House of Representatives is 2 years. Right, let's jump into the executive branch, okay? Very straightforward here, made up of two people, the president and the vice president. So the president is the head of state, they're the commander-in-chief of the armed forces as well, so they're the leader of the army. Okay, they can enforce laws, they can veto bills, they can conduct foreign policy, of course, as you well know, they can appoint federal judges and other officials, and they can even grant pardons, okay? Oh, we go back to this for a second. Of course, there's also the vice president. Okay, it should be noted, there they are. This supports the president essentially, okay? The vice president supports the president and actually serves as the president of the Senate, believe it or not. So if there's a tie on a vote in the Senate, the vice president actually has the casting vote. And this is where political leanings can be quite important, because if you're a Republican vice president and there's a vote that the Republicans are hoping to get passed in the Senate, but there's a tie, well, it's likely that the Republicans are going to now have a majority, which is very important. So the political allegiance, if you will, of the vice president is also very key as president of the Senate. Right, finally, the judicial branch, the highest court in the US, it's consisted of the cabinet, who are the kind of main advisors to the president, composed of, different heads of state. So the Secretary of Defense, the Secretary of State. Think of these kind of like ministers in Ireland, but with like quite a bit more power. There's also federal agencies, part of the part of the judicial branch, such as the EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, and of course, as we all know, the FBI, the Federal Bureau of Investigation. So, very briefly, why are checks and balances important? Why is it important that not one of these three have all the power? Well, they're crucial because they prevent any one branch from becoming too powerful and make sure that it's distributed fairly. Okay, they help to prevent against tyranny, so one particular branch taking over. So no single branch can be too dominant. Secondly, they also encourage collaboration between all the different branches. Since each branch has some control over the other, they have to work together to govern effectively and democratically. Thirdly, it helps to protect individual liberties, okay? As Alexander Hamilton once said, the judiciary, for example, acts as a guardian of the Constitution. And finally, they promote accountability. Each branch has to essentially be on its A game. Otherwise, it's going to be targeted by the other two branches, okay? Though, I suppose any kind of misdoings, any wrongdoings will be called out, okay? So Congress can impeach the president or federal judges for misconduct. So Congress, the legislative branch, can actually impeach people from the executive branch if they feel like misconduct has occurred. So, three very quick key questions. Pause the video here, see if you can get them right. Right, who is head of the executive branch? It is, of course, the President of the United States. Secondly, what are checks and balances? What do they prevent? They are a system of governance where the three main branches share power to prevent tyranny or one branch from having too much power. And finally, what do checks and balances encourage? Well, they encourage collaboration and teamwork between the three branches to ensure proper democratic order and fairness. See you guys in lesson 2.
If you like this video, you'll love our notes. You can get some for free in the link in the description of this video.